I think many times what we look at is we need to look at God first. We need to look at talent second, opportunity last. Okay. So what we do is we live for God. And through living for God, we get to utilize our talents. We get to live in the gifts. We get to live in what God has given us to glorify God. But remember, we first live for God. Our lives are for God. Our lives point in the direction of God. Our lives are a living sacrifice, Romans 12:1, where it speaks that. So then we utilize the talents, the gifts. And then thirdly, because we utilize those talents and gifts, opportunities open. What we've shifted was that I'm focusing on the talent. I'm focusing on the gift. So I'm focusing on things that I'm good at so that opportunities can open. And when I can have opportunities, I'll be able to financially sustain my family. I can get the car I always wanted. I can do all of those nice things. And then lastly, I include God. That is basically what's making its rounds in church. We are talent driven. We are goal driven. We get taught about the talent and the gift, the opportunity that comes with it, more than what we get taught to live for God. The reason why I say so, what happens when the talent or the gift can't operate anymore? Because your purpose has been linked to this talent or gift. And so opportunities dry up. That means your relationship with God starts to suffer. Does that make sense? When in actual fact, it should be that my relationship with God is still going to be intact. So even if the talent can't operate and opportunities dry up, that my fulfillment and purpose will still be in God, because He will open doors for new talents to come forth and new opportunities to be brought into existence and into reality. Does that make sense? So I think that's important to note. You ask me, what is an example of that? Let's say you've got a keyboardist. He's only been focused on talent. And with talent, he's been getting opportunities. With opportunities, then he goes and he's like, oh, thank God, whatever. But his life doesn't reflect that he's living for God. Something happens to his hands. So he's not able to be playing keyboard anymore, or piano. So opportunities start drying up. That means now we start blaming God, and we're like, God, you took this thing away from me. This is the only thing I was good at. This is the only thing that I was great at. And you took it away from me. And now relationship suffers, because relationship was built on the experience of the talent and the execution and result of the opportunity. And so I gave gratification to God, when in actual fact, my life should be based on gratification to God, sacrifice and living for God, so that when I do get to live through the talent and the opportunities do open, even when the talent and opportunities are not operational anymore, my purpose is still found in God, because I wasn't using those things as a purpose to worship God. They were only by which a method is used to worship Him. Right? Does that make sense? That was a mouthful, but I hope that made sense, because I started realizing that we live in today's culture. In Christianity, that's what's being taught. It's okay to just have God in the car. It's not okay for God to be driving it. You need to take hold of your destiny. And to some degree, there's a truth to that. To some degree, there is. I think that even with Jurgen Klopp, being Christian, being in the secular world of football and everything else, and still attaining success, 100%. But like he says, on football, is not completely dependent on his whole life. So if he doesn't succeed now, life sucks and all of those things. Yeah, it will be horrible, but because he's got Jesus, because he's got God, he's able to live a more fulfilled life and to see things the way that God wants him to see, right? So that is it for today. I hope that you guys can go, and as you are setting yourself up for this week, right? What are you prioritizing right now? Like I said, like I mentioned, you can go and listen to that back again, where I speak about those 3 little points, and you can expound that more. I think we should have a conversation where we actually expound that, right? But here's a thought that I just want you to look at as you go into this week, as you're thinking about certain things. And it's just like going into this week, where do you find yourself, right? Do you find yourself where the talent or the gift is based on your opportunities, and that then results in your relationship with God? Do you find yourself being in a situation where maybe you are creative and you've been doing all these creative things, but maybe you've slacked a little bit in your relationship with God? You've been looking for opportunities, doing the grind, but God wasn't involved in that grind. And I want to encourage you today: involve God in that grind, involve God in what you are doing, involve God, put Him first. And I think that you hear it a lot of times, you hear it many times, but it's really amazing when you put God first in something, and God gives you the wisdom on how to handle with various opportunities so that your talent can be effective and that you can produce a result that is going to be fulfilling, because God is the one driving it. I think that is a lot better. That even if perhaps the thing doesn't work out, that you know that God was at the forefront of it, and God gives you peace, and you'll be able to walk through it in a way that is pleasing to God. So I want you to just think about it as you go through this week, as you go through this new month. It's a new season. Think about it, and maybe you find yourself being a pastor, for example. You haven't got a church or whatever. What is there that God has given you to explore yourself, to open yourself to other opportunities, because you are now walking and putting God first in this thing, So the point I'm trying to make is that many times we look at the elements of the gift, and that makes us, when really it's the giver of the gift, and that is who makes us. And that's where we find fulfillment, and that's where we find truth, and that's where we find our success. And so we shouldn't be so much dependent on the outcome of what our gifts can produce, but that we should be focused on the effectiveness of how my gift can bring glorification to God, and my life being fully dependent on God. Right? Do you see those two differences? And I hope that it makes sense.